Creativity.
The process of having original ideas that have value.
Creativity.
What we really need to teach kids to do is how to learn, how to have a passion for learning new things.
The academics look more like the arts.
Educating people out of their creative capacities.
Creativity.
Creative thinking.
My big question is, how can we nurture creativity in education? In order to present how various educational models operate with respect to creativity, I'm accessing the collective intelligence of YouTube for videos from the general public, then remixing these clips together to satisfy my research question. Thankfully, there's no shortage of video clips to pull from. In fact, there's so much content available that I can't possibly scour every video related to my topic. There's just too many. This question, how can we nurture creativity in education, is a big one. So in order to help guide my YouTube search, I've broken it down into 3 sub-questions that focus on the conditions under which creativity can thrive.
Creativity is an operational idea. You can plan for it systematically. You cannot predict the outcome of human development. All you can do is, like a farmer, create the conditions under which they will begin to flourish.
So what kind of conditions are conducive to creativity? Well, according to my observations as an artist, researcher, teacher, and according to the literature, for creativity to flourish, people need to be autonomous, they need support, and they need to not be judged. Really, these areas are interdependent. Depending on how well these conditions are met determines how well the opportunity for creativity is maximized. I'll address these one at a time, looking at YouTube videos to shed light on how educational models from across the spectrum either nurture or neglect each condition. Specifically, I'm looking into unschooling, homeschooling, Sudbury Valley free schools, Montessori schools, Waldorf schools, as well as alternatives within mainstream schooling and mainstream schooling itself. First, autonomy.
The urge to direct our own lives.
How and to what extent are learners able to control what they do, as well as control when and how long they pursue an activity? In other words, who's in the driver's seat? Who decides where to go and for what length of time?
The process that makes children stupid, at least stupid in school, is other people trying to control their learning.
We have to recognize that education is personal. People pull away from it or just disengage.
The best leaders understand that people need to have their time protected. They need to have the space in which they can have sustained acts of creativity, and they need it every day.
Hundreds of scientific investigations that have shown when you're autonomously motivated, your behavior will be more creative.
Unschooling is an educational philosophy that is under the subcategory of homeschooling, where people aren't really forced to do any schoolwork or take any tests that they don't want to. It's child-led, self-expressive, learn about what you want, when you want to. It's really cool.
Where homeschooling could mean school at home, where you're taking the same principles and applications used in school and just bringing them home, unschooling is more not school.
They allow their children to set their own educational pace. So they don't force them to learn anything. The children get to learn whatever they feel like they should learn. Okay, so basically it's giving all the power to the child when it comes to their education.
Zoe and Tegan are their own teachers.
I get to learn whatever I want, whenever I want. Just because you're not in school learning doesn't mean that you're not learning at all.
Have you ever met anyone who isn't interested in something? Have you ever met someone who isn't capable of learning? We like to learn. We are good at it. We don't need to be shown how or made to do it.
They're just engaged at all times, questioning, interested and curious and doing and moving, asking and meeting and grabbing new things and building things and creating.
Unschooling is life learning. It's learning from everything around us, from people, from places. We go to museums, we take classes. The longer you unschool, the more you realize that learning is happening all the time.
Children can continue to explore the world in the ways that are most interesting and productive for them. Let the child make the curriculum.
Children know what to do. My young children create a more rigorous curriculum for themselves than any schooling environment can ever produce, just by living their lives and doing things every day.
I hack my education. I take advantage of opportunities in my community and through a network of my friends and family. It's like a remix or a mashup of learning. It's a mindset, not a system. Once you're motivated to learn something, you can get a lot done in a short amount of time and on your own. It's flexible, opportunistic, and it never loses sight of making happy, healthy, and creativity a priority.
Children will learn to do what they want to learn to do.
Learning is like breathing. It's just part of life, and it's going to happen. You can't stop it.
What I was doing as a teacher, where I was throwing information at them, and a lot of it wasn't sticking because there wasn't an interest in the children to begin with. I was teaching what I had to teach them.
You're in control. You learn so much more. You learn so much more than being in some machine that's set up for you to do this or set up for you to do that. You actually learn to be yourself.
Unschooling is about choosing the direction of your learning. So I chose to go and take a class on biology. I chose to take violin classes and dance classes to learn those. Still unschooling.
With a keen interest in freedom and liberty, that children should be granted those same rights.
Homeschool is basically described that you do your school at home.
There's such a variety of diversity with home education. Different values, different belief systems, and also different interests.
Parent-directed education made good sense as an alternative to us.
Choose a curriculum. Figure out what teaching materials you need to purchase. Though flexibility is one of the advantages of homeschooling, you should still have a general idea of how you will fit teaching and schoolwork into the household routine.
For 5-year-old Julian,
that's right,
and his 7-year-old brother Brennan, a routine school day involves a seat at the kitchen table and lessons from mom or dad.
She leaves the plan of what they need to do, the work, and I'll sit with them to do it.
We'd have a scheduled routine. We would get up, we would read in the morning, then we'd go and do our chores, we'd eat breakfast, and then we'd start school. We did school till about lunch, and then we would, take a break for lunch, and then we'd do the rest of our school throughout the day, like stuff we didn't need my mom for. We called it homework, even though it was all at home.
English, Algebra 2,
history,
Math, Chemistry, Art, Bible,
World Religion,
American History,
Geography.
Most of my schoolwork is on my computer, a lot of which I can do independently. It may seem weird for some people to have to learn without a teacher present, but a big part of homeschooling, in my opinion, is learning how to be self-taught, meaning I'm responsible for making sure I'm learning the material. My math course, for example, is 1 part lecture and 1 part interactive equations. And my philosophy class is taught in a virtual classroom with students from all around the country.
Homeschooling through the internet, they will have also a lecturer to do video lectures that the young people can watch at their own speed. And it's going to be designed to get people to read. It's going to be designed to people write. It's going to be designed to think about businesses and how to interact. So I'm very encouraged by this, and hopefully we can participate in this transition away from the disaster that's happening in our public school system.
Schools in which you don't have to go to classes unless you want to, and you could choose any class to go to. The decisions are made democratically. What these schools and programs have in common is that they are learner-centered and empower the students.
School meeting is extremely important because it's basically what runs the school. Everything is decided in the school meeting. School meeting is the authority.
Everyone that comes to the school is a school meeting member. Everyone has an equal vote. And I feel like the community of the school really teaches kids that they're just as equal as any other person here.
This is a school really run by the kids, because the kids always would outvote the staff if there were really any philosophical or political differences between the staff and the students. children do what they want to do. And mostly, if you look at it, you wouldn't be surprised to see that what they're primarily doing, little kids are primarily playing. But if you look at the play and if you look at what they're doing closely, what you see is very sophisticated activity. The play is complex. It's exercising higher mental functions all the time.
The kids at Fairhaven, what they're able to do is when they really want something to happen, it's really on them to make it. Every problem and good thing at Fairhaven is the kids do it.
To be free while at the same time realizing that there are restrictions you must put on yourself.
It's the hardest school to be in, and you ask the kids and they'll tell you it's the hardest school to be in.
Why?
Because if you're told what to do all day, it's like taking care of you all day, right? You don't have to make decisions. Here, a kid has to make decisions, but they go through all the ups and downs of mistakes, of learning from mistakes, of falling on their faces, picking themselves up again. So they have to prioritize their time, and they have to sit and say, well, what is that I really want to do? They have to really find out who they are.
The school gave me the gift of time to let my own interests rise to the surface. Any creative effort, perhaps any effort at all, requires a great deal of thought, gift of time to relax, to have those things come to the surface that were there. It gave us time for reflection, for the introspection that you need to really develop your own creativity.
The Google guys don't credit their success to drive or brains. They say it was nursery school.
We both went to Montessori school, and I think it was part of that training of not following rules and orders and being self-motivated, questioning what's going on in the world, doing things a little bit different.
She established a revolutionary philosophy that children are inherently independent learners.
Learning through doing is really key to how the Montessori approach works.
They're encouraged to ask questions and think outside the box instead of memorizing and regurgitating facts that are placed in front of them. Now, a key element in fostering this love of learning is what we like to call an uninterrupted work cycle, where the day's not chopped up, and instead, these children are able and allow the developmental freedom to focus and concentrate on one area of study as long as they want.
Montessori schools stoke that flame by promoting hands-on, self-paced, collaborative, challenging, and joyful learning. They encourage divergent thinking instead of convergent thinking, innovation instead of standardization. The teacher does not stand at the front delivering the same information to 30 children while trying to keep all of them on the same page. Children in Montessori follow their interests wherever that passion leads, however quickly it leads them, regardless of what other students in the class are working on.
In Waldorf Education, the teachers are part of the administration, and they have really the sole and predominant voice in how the curriculum is developed in the school. And that's what's really wonderful about it, is that there isn't this large overarching authority that tells you exactly what you must do and how you must present the curriculum.
The teachers are involved in the pedagogical decisions.
Parents are responsible for the running of the school, and the sustainability of the school makes it very much a community-based school system.
The curriculum is designed to meet the child at each stage of development.
The class teacher walks a path of discovery with the children and guides them into an understanding of the world of meaning, rather than the world of cause and effect.
As they get older, they become more interested in doing what you want them to do because of their love for what they're being taught.
Rather than presenting theories that have to be memorized and then examples given, the attempt is to provide experiences and let the children enjoy and relish what they're doing, and then they come to the ideas and some of the theories themselves.
So all this curriculum is all in order to allow them to become who they truly are in a free sort of way, not what I think they should be or what you think they should be.
Philosophically, where we started, the idea was very personal. You could sit around a table and have more like a seminar.
We put a lot of effort in trying to kind of negotiate things back and forth, students with teachers, teachers with students, whether it be at all school meetings or whatever it is. It's very democratic that way.
Here at Alpha 2, you get to learn your own way. Whether you want to work on the computer, with friends, in the community, whatever you want.
You still have to cover the ministry curriculum, but it's the way in which you deliver the content that matters. So it's the process more than content.
Okay.
So we do cover all grade expectations as prescribed by the ministry curriculum.
One of the primary disadvantages of alternative schools is that the learning is self-paced. The learning is up to the learner. And so there aren't really a lot of external factors to drive motivation in the learner. They need to do it on their own.
If schools is deeply committed against freedom, deeply committed to the idea that children won't do anything good unless somebody makes them.
While you're in school, you have very, very little control of what you're doing. You're being directed pretty much every minute of the day. The rules are very strict about what you can and cannot do. The children are not free in school. People crave freedom, and that's as true of children as it is of people at any age. And when you restrict them in these severe ways, they're not happy. And this is not the kinds of conditions conducive to learning.
Unfortunately, that kind of exuberant interest in learning gets pretty much damped down once the information is being processed for them through an institution like school. In school, the learning becomes something very different from what organically, naturally children love to do, which is to learn. They are not in control of their process. They can't follow their interests.
Their imagination and their creativity is held captive by those who are within the context of the schooling environment. Whoever is in charge tells them what the curriculum is that they're supposed to be learning. So all of these things together combine to make a very oppressive culture.
I have to learn things that I will never, ever, ever, ever use in my life. For example, when am I ever going to be walking down a grocery store and have to be like, oh look, that soup can is a cylinder. I need to find the circumference, I need to find the radius, I need to find the surface area. You know what, I need to find the volume before I get this. I need to do all this crazy stuff that I learned in geometry to buy soup, right? Wrong.
You have one person at the front telling all the people who aren't in the front what to think and what to understand and how to think about things. And I don't think that really works in terms of teaching eloquence and teaching real knowledge.
Something gets violated when you force yourself, really, to learn things that you don't even want to learn.
Kids are told to read textbooks, they're forced to fill out worksheets. Kids literally get arrested and get thrown into this Alcatraz-like system. I mean, if you look at prisons and schools, they're pretty similar. I mean, in prison and school, you're basically told what to do all day. Your bells dictate your schedule. Attendance is compulsory, and you're really cut off from society. So there are a number of very similar things.
I feel like kids that go to school are like prisoners. They're prisoners in their own life.
By a reasonable definition of prison, school is not just like prison, it is prison.
I make kids work harder than they ever thought they could. You cannot work in groups. No, you can't ask a question, so put your hand down. Why won't I let you go to the bathroom? Because you're bored and you don't really have to go, do you? What's taught in our classrooms needs to be far more reflective of the kids that come into the classroom. You would have to say school has not made an effort or has not connected to them in a way that makes them feel that they can engage with what's going on.
When I started teaching, I could see the disengagement happening more and more, and kids just, why do we have to learn about this? And I said, well, because I say you have to learn about it. I totally flipped everything. I'll post the classwork for that day. But then after that, they're on their own. I do have kids, though, that like to go find their own stuff. So they'll start with mine, but then they'll go off and say, here, Mr. Bennett, here's another example on how this works. This is a cool website I found. It gives them individuality.
The next condition to consider is support. How and to what extent are learners provided support for creativity? Support can mean direct teaching, if that's what's asked for specifically, or it may mean precisely the opposite, leaving someone alone. Support spans from the unsolicited, like offering encouragement and trust, to the solicited, as in providing the appropriate materials, environment, feedback, and instruction as asked for.
We found that when people had more positive emotions on one day, they were more likely to have creative ideas that day. And not only that, they were more likely to have creative ideas the following day.
It's not a matter of saying, well, this is what you're going to do today, this is how you're going to do it, this is how I'm going to test you, but a matter of bringing them into the situation an incredible appetizer for fantasy and play. And once that takes over, then the kids, they will have a million ideas.
Unschooling is based on trusting a child that they will learn and that they have an innate desire to learn.
The French philosopher Rousseau proposed that basically adults should set up the environment and stay out of the way, that the child has within him or her the capacity to learn, and the adult's job was to set up the environment so that they could sort of explore things.
We talk far too much. We interfere with their processes far too much as adults. So to just shut up a little bit more, which does not mean laissez-faire. It does not mean that you just let them go. You let them explore their in their own path and come to their own conclusions. You see, you give them freedom to do that. You're on an eye-to-eye level, honoring their processes, supporting them.
The family will have books, records, tools, depending on the kinds of things they're interested in, the kinds of things they do. But whatever the parents do, their life is accessible to the children. The children aren't locked in the house. The parents take them where they go. They're taken seriously as people. They're talked to. Their concerns are listened to. When their parents meet with other adults, they are admitted to the world. I mean, they're treated the way children were treated before modern childhood was invented. They're simply a part of the world that their parents live in. And as I say, they ask questions, they get interested in things, in which case the parents, to use a very simple case, if a child likes dinosaurs, then we help them find books about dinosaurs, or chemistry, or rockets, or volcanoes, or computers, or violins, or whatever it is they may be. But let's not try to decide how they are going to use that material.
That parent needs to be involved. Just because you're doing unschooling doesn't mean hands off. It means you're more involved. You need to be out, ready to get your hands dirty and take that path less traveled.
Facilitating our children's learning by bringing the world to them and them to the world without the constraints of a school building.
We're trying to show them how to learn for themselves and how to actually find their own goals and accomplish those goals.
Unschoolers have to go out and find their own resources or use tools that are found in our everyday lives. And that requires, some creative solutions at times. And it also requires some dedication to go out and find materials. And that's exciting and challenging.
If we reach our limits, we find help. So we're not alone. Of course, we're going to get support.
At our house, curiosity and creativity was not regulated or controlled. It was influenced and facilitated. And those are different things. When we weren't that inspired, which was quite often, we did nothing. We were allowed to just do nothing.
All the people I know who are involved in homeschooling, who are doing it well, devote a huge amount of time to it. They take it very seriously. They approach it rigorously. There are resources available to people who are committed to homeschooling. There are some great websites, some great associations, and the challenge, of course, is to provide a broadly based education which uses the expertise and skills of the students and the people doing the homeschooling, but brings in other talents and resources beyond that immediate group as well. And the internet, of course, makes that more and more possible.
Whether it's online or in person, whether there's an existing support group or whether you have to just meet a few moms at the park, make sure that you get hooked in.
If you've taken on the responsibility for teaching every single subject to every one of your kids, there's nothing wrong with outsourcing a little bit of that teaching workloads.
There are 11 members of staff employed by the school.
I spend a lot of time walking around and just seeing what's going on so that if people need anything, they can find somebody and get the help that they're looking for.
Do they ever ask you any questions?
Oh, sure. Pretty much anything.
I try to help maintain the music rooms, show people where the door to the music room is, get them in there, and then I kind of stand back and let them get it themselves. This is a place where the teachers don't do it for you. There's no workbook to follow. It's really learning in the trenches, which more and more with the kind of new business and new possibilities out there, it's a great experience. It's a real experience.
I don't see any reason to treat children different from other people.
My experience is that they're human beings just like everybody else. And to view a child, certainly after they become articulate and they can make some judgment, which is usually about 4 or 5, to view a child as any less competent to make decisions for themselves than adults, it's ridiculous.
I like Shakespeare. It's just really cool.
You're happy doing this by yourself rather than getting in a teacher?
Yeah. It's not that hard. I'm listening to it on YouTube, and I'm also reading it at the same time. It gives you sort of an idea of how you should say it.
What teachers can do sometimes, if a person wants a specific answer to a specific question, they can give them that. But the most of us in life, we go about learning things. I mean, you and I and anybody else really, if they think about their lives, they'll realize that most of what they got out of life, they've learned somehow on their own, and they found ways to find out what they want to know rather than have sitting in front of somebody who's telling them.
If current trends continue, learners will be taking much greater responsibility for their education. If predictions are correct, technology will emerge to support autonomy in learning at home, in school or in the community.
My name is Ken and I'm here to talk to you about
Personalisation and technology, two drivers for change which are coming together and creating the potential to revolutionise education for the next generation.
The Montessori approach embraces the needs of the unique child rather than the more typical group classroom model. With specialized learning materials and exploratory activities, your child is guided through a series of exercises and encouraged to work independently, following his or her own unique developmental path. This approach to academics promotes self-confidence, self-esteem, and self-motivation.
And Montessori was a very strong advocate of children having available to them materials that they would be able to use with their hands, that is to say, strictly manipulate.
Montessori designed sensory materials that embedded children's learning in the physical world. The exact models for the materials she designed over 100 years ago are still in use today.
In each classroom, children range in age by 2 to 3 years, allowing natural extended family relationships to develop. All of the teachers serve as guides, helping children develop confidence in their own abilities by responding to each child's individual needs.
The goal of Waldorf Education is really to meet each child where they are and to give them a variety of experiences and academic and artistic experiences so that the learning becomes alive.
It's not just a job, it's really a way of finding yourself working with that child over time, teaching them in each of their centers. So have I touched their mind today? Have I touched their feelings? Have I engaged them, their will, their body? Have I gotten them to do something? Over time, I feel that if you meditate on the child and you are committed to opening their heart, then you can find any sort of solution that is necessary.
The Waldorf faculty holds the child at the center of their work. Every child is known in a Waldorf school. No child is hidden. The individual stands, the human being stands at the center of Waldorf education. It is the sole reason why Waldorf education exists.
This unfolding experience of leading the child into the world in a way that has patience about it, that has grace and space.
Well, we just don't have any support for kids with special needs, so we basically don't take kids who need special education. All children thrive in a small setting. They have a lot more parent involvement because parents have made a choice to send their children there.
Well, alternative schools, at least in my experience, have always been connected with social movements for equity, justice, racial justice, and economic justice.
Teachers have really been a lot of help. They really do a lot of individual support for each student.
The only reason the courses are great and work here is because the teachers put a lot of themselves into it. They're very unique courses and very unique people run them.
The life experiences that the teachers have bring a different life experience and like a different mentality to what each different course that they're teaching.
I don't feel stupid. I feel smart. I think Inglenook brings out the best in people.
It's just a lot more support-based. Like, in public school, you don't do your work, they give you an F. You don't do your work in alternative school, they ask you what's wrong, rather than, why didn't you do this? I just found in general they're a lot more understanding.
They give you a lot more one-on-one help, and they have a lot less students to help, so you get more time to get help.
One of our goals those days was to show that public education can be made to be flexible enough to provide different ways of learning, different ways of relating to students, different kinds of curriculum, without destroying a public school system.
There is a terror that kids will feel good about things, simply be pleased with themselves and therefore not work hard. Most schools are not at all prepared to help kids feel good. Quite the contrary. There is such an emphasis on rigor and raising the bar and higher standards that we end up with a lot of kids who are alternately bored and anxious because the education really isn't about helping them to feel like proficient thinkers who love learning.
The schools that they have to work in are diametrically the opposite of the kind of environment that's necessary for people to really develop creativity and critical thinking.
The school should have been, ought to be, the family, not the factory, but it adopted the factory model and it's in love with it to this day.
Schooling is a form of adoption. You give your kid away at his most, or his or her most plastic years, to a group of strangers. You accept a promise, sometimes stated and more often implied, that the state, to its agents, knows better how to raise your children and educate them than you, your neighbors, your grandparents, your local traditions do.
The number one priority is supporting learning for all. How do we create a rigorous, relevant, student-centered learning environment that better prepares all students for the 21st century? Technology is a big part of that. I've always said that technology is no longer an option, it's an essential tool for learning. Personal electronic devices can be used effectively in the classroom to better engage students in their learning.
We are accountable and that we are professionals all the time and that we have the best interests of their children at heart.
Lastly, how and to what extent is evaluation built into the model? Evaluation refers to judgment from another person, not to be confused with qualitative feedback, since feedback on its own can be constructive and constitute support. However, it's pretty hard to feel supported and in control if ultimately someone else will have the final word on what and how you've done. So, although in theory evaluation exists to help someone improve their creativity, effectively it does the opposite.
If kids feel like they're going to be punished, or the flip side, which is positive reinforcement, this ends up leading kids to feel less likely to feel a sense of ownership and pride in their own accomplishments.
You can't cure anything by punishment.
If you're not prepared to be wrong, you will never come up with anything original. We stigmatize mistakes, and we're now running national education systems where mistakes are the worst thing you can make.
The more traditional and back to basics and test-oriented schooling is, the more kids lose interest in learning, the more superficial their thinking, and the more the gap grows between the haves and the have-nots.
We don't have metrics. These children don't get assessed regularly. So we don't know that the kids are learning what they need to master.
These kids aren't assessed. In other words, there are no tests.
Right.
How do we ever judge them and compare them to students their own age?
We were never tested, we were never graded. It might be the essence of self-education. You don't have to learn because you'll get in trouble or because you're going to fail a test. You have to learn because you want to, because there's something in you that wants to reach out and touch the world and want to communicate with it.
When I was 14, I took my ACT and I got a 26 on that. Then I got my GED. I got my Bachelor's of Fine Arts in theater, and I graduated magna cum laude with a 3.84 GPA. Last year I took the MAT, and I scored in the 98th percentile, and I'm 2 weeks away from getting my master's, getting a 4.0. That's my educational background and my grades and test scores, which most people use as a standard of intelligence.
When it comes to assigning grades to my children's work, I do so for tests and quizzes. I use number grades, mainly percentages, rather than letter grades. So by the time my children take a math test, they have had a lot of opportunities to review, to practice, to become familiar and comfortable with the material, and they are familiar and comfortable by the time they take that test. So they know that the score I'm looking for in math is 95% and above.
If you want to do that and assign grades from the very earliest ages, you may. But it's not necessary to assign grades to your preschoolers, kindergartners, elementary school students, and even your middle schoolers. Of course, they are demonstrating competence to you in many different ways. There does come a time, however, and it's usually around high school, when parents need to start thinking about grades. 99% of the time, these students are going to need a transcript when they apply for colleges.
In order to convey to a college, how did you evaluate them? I wanted to look tough and cool and school-like. I was able to think of a million different ways that I had evaluated them. I had evaluated them on their classroom discussion, reading of the material, the different ways that they had written about the material. I graded them on whether or not they went to the field trip.
Sudbury Valley, what kind of school is it?
It's a ungraded private school.
With us now is Dr. Dan Greenberg, the co-founder of the Sudbury Valley School in Framingham, Massachusetts, just west of Boston. That private school gives no tests, no homework, no grades, and all rules are made by the students. But it doesn't seem to be any discipline involved here.
No, on the contrary, the discipline comes from within. This is the discipline that you have with little children. It starts when they're born. It's a discipline of trying to grow up to be an effective adult. That's what we depend on. Nature provides kids with that automatically. What a kid tries to do more than anything else is to grow up and to be an effective adult.
A democratic school is first and foremost a place where a child doesn't have to feel threatened, feel comfortable and adequate and free.
At these Sudbury schools, you don't have some set subject you're learning, and you don't have some set amount of things you're supposed to learn about that subject. There's no way to grade somebody on a subject, and there's no reason to grade somebody on a subject.
From experience, I know that compulsory external evaluation often does a lot of harm and not much good. Usually a person knows themselves best, and someone comes and every day tells them, you're not very good at math, doesn't necessarily mean they're not good at math, but does mean that they may now think that they're not good at math.
Consider the absurdity of grades and testing. If you go to a library, they assume that you want to learn something, and it's your business. They do not make you sit down and test and grade you on the way out. Why should school be different? It's amazing, actually, that the whole mania about testing is the opposite of learner-centered approach that we believe in.
Conventional schools assume children need incentives for learning. Gold stars, A's, honor roll ribbons, popcorn parties. If they don't respond, they must be dealt punishments, bad grades, trips to the principal's office, etc. Montessori schools assume the opposite. Children do not need to be forced to learn. Montessori does all this with no grades, no tests, no homework.
You teach by teaching, not by correcting.
Building assessment rather right into the sensory materials. Normally, right, when we have children doing things in traditional schools, the children work on a project. That project is passed off to a teacher. The teacher marks what the student did correctly and incorrectly, and then the feedback is given back to the students. What Montessori emphasizes as much as possible is taking the teacher out of the assessment equation. The materials themselves enable the child to assess whether he is doing them correctly or incorrectly. It is obvious to the child perceptually. So the point here is that we want to be teaching students to have their own independent judgment as opposed to being required to depend on teachers telling them whether they got things right or wrong.
Artistic activity and the development of the imagination are hugely important in Steiner schools, where high standards are achieved through encouragement, not pressure, through finding the joy in learning, not through testing. At no stage are the students continually tested in any subject or made to compete against each other for attention or prestige. This is all part of the Steiner ethos too, which holds that a less pressurised childhood will help to develop a healthy, capable and well-balanced adult.
The competition isn't with the other person, the competition's with themselves. And because of that, it makes them very dynamic, very powerful people who have very strong sense of direction. They're quite capable of leading, they're quite capable of taking on responsibility.
You do have to audition, and there's other high schools where you have to write an essay to get in. So they are
you know, they are, for all intents and purposes, a kind of a charter school.
Everybody there was extremely concerned about grades. As a kid who does not excel in academics, necessarily, it was not my kind of place. It was so competitive. Everyone was so stressed out.
How do kids do academically, Chris?
Well, we find that students and parents who prefer the alternative setting, based on the feedback we've received, tends to do very well.
EQAO provides the data with regards to achievement. And if we can use EQAO to help inform our practice and our teachers' practice about seeing the particular needs and individualities of students, their strengths and their weaknesses, if you will, we have a better chance at communicating with the students and building that relationship, which is so crucial in that teacher learning strategy.
If education is the key, then school is the lock. Because it rarely ever develops your mind to the point where it can perceive red as green and continue to go when someone else said stop. Because as long as you follow the rules and pass the exams, you're cool. But are you aware that examiners have a checklist? And if your answer is something outside of the box, the automatic response is a cross.
According to schools, art isn't a means for expression and experimentation anymore. When we put so many restrictions on something as free as art, we don't bother using our creativity, and we just do whatever it takes to get a good grade on the project. This lack of innovation isn't going to help us later in life.
When we involve students in the classroom assessment process, when we increase the amount of specific descriptive feedback they receive during the learning, and when we decrease the amount of evaluative feedback, students learn more.
We have something called MCAS at the end of the year. And the whole year, the whole year, they just learn about the stuff they need to learn about for MCAS. Then once they take the MCAS, they're rated. And if you fail at MCAS, you're considered not smart, even though you've been learning about everything the whole entire year.
Children themselves begin to feel like the whole purpose of life is to outperform others in school.
And making young children take standardized tests and giving them grades and so on are all justified based on the theory that says people are going to do unpleasant things to you later, so we'd better make you suffer now to prepare you. And of course, it's ludicrous, it's almost laughable, except that it's so sad, and that's exactly what's going on in much of the country.
So which educational models serve creativity best? Which model relinquishes control to the learner, provides support in all its manifestations, and revokes evaluation? And which models don't? These conclusions are left up to you and I, and so are the actions we take as a result.
The mainstream has rocketed away on these rails of conformity, and I think it's time to make the alternative into the mainstream.
I want to see teachers becoming really interested in freedom for the child. I want people to be wide and broad in dealing with children. It will come, it's coming slowly.